Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition, episode number 93, Mechanical Breakdown Series, volume 27, breaking down the swing and talking about new Red Sox second baseman. We'll get to that a little bit later on as well. Trevor Story, who was arguably one of the more underrated free agents in this past offseason before and after the lockout, just secured that large deal with the Boston Red Sox. Let me bring in professional evaluator, successful business owner, former coach, friend, and co-host, Jake Epstein.
Excited story, being in Colorado. I think I've been here 19 years, almost 19 years. Kind of saw Trevor Story the whole time. Coming up through after Tulowitzki, was traded to Toronto. So, I know his swing quite well, and I followed him because he's a really exciting guy to watch play. So Boston's in for a real treat to have him. Although I think he's playing. Is he playing short? I think he might be playing second.
He's going to be playing second base, and we'll get to that in a little bit. I have a scouting report here. I'm glad you brought up Tulowitzki. A scouting report on Trevor Story. This is from MLB.com in October of 2015 by Bernie Kleskoff. And Bernie writes, and God, October of 2015 felt like just yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah.
Royals won the World Series, beat the Mets that year. My God. 2015 is one of those years you remember back on and you think it felt like yesterday. And here we are in 2022. Yeah. But the trade of Rockies, this is from, again, Bernie Kleskoff of MLB.com. The trade of Rockies shortstop Troy Tulowitzki may have opened the door for a young prospect infielder like Trevor Story. Maybe not as a starter, but perhaps as a utility player if the infield roster features new faces next season. So my point is to this, and Jose Reyes was a stopgap between Troy Tulowitzki and Trevor Story, but the Rockies know how to pick their shortstops.
Yeah, they've done a pretty darn good job with that, and we'll see we'll see what comes now. Who comes through. I'm trying to think. I saw somebody. I was reading something yesterday. I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was the Rockies or not. But they had someone that they traded. Oh no, it was the Astros. The Astros have like a great shortstop in their system that they're bringing up, and his build even looks like Correa. It just looks like a little clone, So them, saying, okay, it's time for you to move on, and we have to give somebody else a chance. That's what baseball is all about. It really is. You have to funnel guys through to give younger players a chance that you draft and you develop, and you hope that they can, have some longevity at the major league level. So it'll be cool to see, some of those guys that moved on, like Story and Correa. Trying to think of other big name guys that kind of, Trey Turner's going to take over with the Dodgers. So the whole Seager trade, that's not a big thing, but it's fun to see new guys, and you got to give them a chance.
Yeah, it's amazing. We talked about the Dodgers and how they pick their players and how their hitters all look alike. And now you mentioned it with the Astros, and their guy coming up now replacing Correa looks like a clone of Carlos Correa. I think there's a theme there with teams and the Rockies too. They just, for whatever reason, know how to pick really good all-star shortstop. Story is a two-time all-star. Wasn't an all-star this past year, but still put up some pretty good numbers. But that report further states, again, this is a scouting report that was written in October of 2015 by Bernie Kleskoff of MLB.com. He writes, Story is well-proportioned, 6'1", 180, a right-handed hitter. He is skilled both offensively and defensively. He's capable of playing shortstop, second base, and third base, and his versatility makes him an attractive player. Now, offensively, and we'll get to his defense in a moment, but offensively, the report goes on to say he's still a streaky hitter. Story struggles to make contact at times, which is true because he did strike out 191 times back in 2017, and he has struck out at least 130 times in each of each of his six seasons. So he's right there, but he has the type of outstanding bat speed that allows him to hit pitches to all fields and is especially sound when a pitcher makes a mistake. Do you agree with that statement of Trevor Story and just an overview of him offensively as a hitter?
Yeah. And when was that written?
That was written in October of 2015.
Yeah. So, his whole career has been after that, but
yeah,
a pretty decent assessment, I would say. He has a big sink, which we'll see in his legs, which helps him get to low pitches, but he also cheats well on high pitches to get to him. A lot of times strikeouts are approach. Quite honestly, like, players could not strike out if they just went up there and tried to put the ball in play on every pitch. I got 3 strikes. All I'm going to do is put it in play. Well, they'd hit under 100, but they wouldn't strike out at all. They wouldn't do any damage. So, that's his approach. His approach is, I'm going to do damage. I'm going to hit the ball hard, and if I don't, I might miss it. Right? I might be early, or I'm going to miss under instead of over, or whatever the process may be. So, he has a swing that I'm not worried as much about strikeouts, as much as, maybe, and maybe I should be, but, his batting average, right? Like, he's consistently, a 270 to 300 hitter, 290 hitter, something like that. I mean, he's got a couple bad years in there, where he hit 240 his second year in 2017.
In 2017, he had 239. That was the lowest of his career. In 2016, his rookie year, he hit 272. Yeah. In 2018, he was an all-star, hit 291, 37 home runs, 108 RBIs. That was a career high. 2019, also an all-star, hit 294, 35 homers, 85 RBIs. 2020, I don't count on this program.
Yeah.
2021, last year, going into his free agent walk year, 251, 24 home runs, 75 RBIs. So maybe last year batting average a little bit low.
Yeah.
Slugging was at 471. Home runs were down a little bit, but I think there was enough of a sample size there for the Red Sox to take a good chance and a flyer on this guy to give him the market value.
Yeah, last year was a terrible year for him, mentally. He was pretty much played all year.
Yeah.
He was dangled all year, and then nothing ever happened. He was never traded.
Yeah.
But the extension talks weren't also that, well, I'm not 100% sure on that, at least publicly. So it was a bad year. He was almost like a dead man walking, and he was expected to be traded and to a contender, and the Rockies never traded him for some reason. Maybe they wanted the extra draft pick, or something like that with the compensation pick. So I'm not sure what it was, but he was not happy, and publicly he was not happy. So he has all that, and then he's got to go out and play shortstop for a team that's in, they're whatever 20 games out of first place because the Giants are running away with it, and the Dodgers are right at their heels. It was, so I don't count that. So what the Red Sox went after, they got, and they got a really good player. And people don't realize like how athletic he is and how fast he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that can beat out a 2-hopper to a shortstop easily. He's so fast. He's one of the fastest guys getting down to first base. So if he stays healthy, in that ballpark too, I think he's going to be great.
Yeah. And last year too, another thing too, before we move on from that, it's got to be psychological torture if you're a player and you're in your walk year. You don't know if you're going to get traded or not. And in Story's case, you kind of want to get traded. You go to a contender. You didn't get that opportunity. Chris Bryant really didn't want to leave the Cubs necessarily, and he showed it emotionally in Washington when he was traded on that Friday to the San Francisco Giants. Can you take us through that mindset of a player when they're about to be traded or they're in their walk year? Bryce Harper was there at one point. Manny Machado was there as well. He actually got traded the same season that Bryce Harper became a free agent in 2018, went to the Dodgers for a while, and then said, I like the West Coast. I like the Padres. I picked them in free agency the very next winter. But what's the mindset like? Because that has to be, for some guys, just psychological push and pull constantly every day as the trade deadline gets closer and closer.
Yeah, that part of it's really stressful. But typically they want to get traded. They want to go to a contender. So the light at the end of the tunnel is I'm going to be great. Like I'm going to go to a place where, it's going to be like new life. I get to a new city and it breathes new life into my lungs. And so you see a lot of players flourish. I remember my dad telling me that in 71 when he got traded to Oakland from the Senators, the last place Senators. And it was just like, he felt like King Kong, like he was he was born again. And I think that's the nice part about being traded. I think it's tougher when all of a sudden, you get traded and you're not expecting it. you're the guy that goes from the contender to the team that traded the superstar, and you're like, okay, here we go. You're the second guy in that trade, and I think sometimes that's a little bit more difficult because they're not expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking another layer into that, maybe that player was a fourth outfielder, and now all of a sudden they're going to get a chance to play every day, or they're a backup shortstop, and now all of a sudden they get to be the starting shortstop with a team that isn't in contention, but a team that's going to give him an opportunity. So sometimes trades are just they're wonderful for both sides.
Yeah.
But I think it's stressful. I mean, you got to go out and play every day, and then all of a sudden you're going to get shipped within the next 3 or 4 days. And you got your bags packed, and then all of a sudden they pull you out, during pregame, and are like, okay, you just got traded.
Yeah.
You're out of the lineup tonight. Go ahead. They'll take care of everything. Get your travel plan set up. So this is what it is. It's a business, but I think getting traded from a team that's not in contention and you're a competitive superstar, I think it's a good move.
One thing I want to bring up before we do move on, Trevor Story, his power numbers playing in Colorado, are those numbers inflated at all, or is he fundamentally, mechanically sound enough to where that doesn't really make much of a difference?
Yeah, I don't think it'll probably hurt his triples. There's a pretty good park. It might hurt his slugging percentage a little bit. People, the air is great here in Colorado. People, always talk about that, but the park is really big to accommodate that. So the gaps are huge. That's why it's so important to have a center fielder that can run. So left center and right center, that's a lot of ground to cover because the field is big. So what people don't realize is you get a lot of extra hits because there's more surface area with 3 outfielders to cover than, say Chicago, where the gaps are pinched. So he might see some of that, I think with Boston, I think he's going to be fine. I mean, maybe that deep left center part, where it cuts across in center field to the monster. I don't know. I think he's going to be fine. He definitely hits the ball hard enough.
Yeah. Well, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. These mechanical breakdown episodes. If you're listening, they are better consumed if you actually watch us do the breakdown. So again, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. Subscribe to that. New episodes and clips being uploaded pretty much every day. Do appreciate you listening, of course, on the audio side, Apple, Google, Spotify, and subscribe to the show. Again, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Follow us on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting on both Twitter and Instagram. Let's move on to the Red Sox now, and the fit that Story provides for Boston gives their lineup a lot more flexibility. If you go back a year ago and look at their opening day lineup, a lot of people, pundits, said, well, the Red Sox, I don't know if that's going to get the job done in the American League East. They may finish third. They may finish fourth. Some said they would even finish in last place. They didn't. They made the postseason, beat the Yankees in the wild card game. But if you look at the lineup for the Red Sox at opening day projections in 2022, and this is according to rotochamp.com, they have Trevor Story batting 5th. And I've always said that, and I'm kind of old school when it comes to this part, batting 5th, if you're the 5th hitter in a lineup at the professional level, college level, you're probably the second best hitter and you're very versatile in that lineup. Is that a good fit for him, batting 5th? Or where would you put him in that Red Sox lineup to maximize his potential?
I think 5th is, your RBI guy,
right.
Your guy that you can depend on to, drive in runs. That's a clutch performer that moments aren't too big for that hitter. So I like him in that spot. I also think that you need an extra base hit guy because maybe your 4 hitter isn't, super fast, right? So, with a runner on second, a little ground ball through the hole might not score that guy. So, you want a guy that can hit extra base hits, maybe score a guy from first base, definitely score him from second base, something like that, who's, also a really good hitter. Takes a little pressure off not being the cleanup guy. But yeah, I kind of see him in that 5th or 6th spot, probably in that lineup, just based on his offensive characteristics.
Yeah. And again, he can move up to 3rd at any time if somebody gets hurt. A couple of projections had JD Martinez batting 4th. They also had Alexander Bogaerts batting 4th, which I was a little bit surprised at. Rafael Devers batting 4th or 6th. I guess we'll see.
It's a really interchangeable lineup.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Very
I mean,
flexible.
they have a lot
Very
of guys that
flexible.
are just quality hitters that aren't unidimensional. So,
Mhm.
boy, Bogarts, sure. I mean, did we ever do a review on Bogarts? Because I
No,
have like this.
we're gonna have to. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a clip from like 5 years ago
Hmm.
that I don't know. I was just watching a game, and it is so good, and it's like the ESPN really high frame rate, and it's so smooth, short to it with his approach. But then when I saw that video, I was like, this dude's gonna hit. Like this guy's gonna hit. And it took him probably 3 years after that to really kind of come into his own and become confident with that swing.
Hmm.
But it certainly has shown up.
Yeah. It's amazing with Bogarts. We'll get to him later on in the weeks to come. He plays in Boston, but he's always every year seemingly overrated. He's just not talked about enough as being one of the best shortstops in all of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. I mean, you go back to when I was a kid, Derek Jeter, Nomar Garciaparra, who was the guy who was kind of left out or at times underrated, Miguel Tejada.
Right.
Now,
Yeah. All
talk
right.
about Bo Bichette.
Because he was in Oakland, right? He was in a
Right.
small market.
Well, Bo Bichette, Fernando Tatis Jr., other
Yeah.
shortstops across baseball. At times it was Javi Baez even. But we don't talk about Alexander Bogarts. I think a
No,
lot of people
in a
would
big
say,
market.
especially in Boston, hey, if I had to start a team tomorrow, I'd start with Bogarts and then Trevor Story playing second base. By the way, with Trevor Story playing second base, I wonder this. You mentioned his athleticism earlier, and I was thinking about this morning, and I kind of want to take this angle too. Not this season, but in the seasons to come, because he is so athletic, he is so fast, he can adapt easily. I've always said, and with reps being as low as they are this year in spring training because of the lack of time to get ready for the season, second base, playing that position, going from shortstop, as we saw with Trey Turner last year when he went from the Nationals to the Dodgers. It's not an easy thing to transition, and it's not easy to understand what the new footwork is like, the new feed, the new angles. So I'm wondering, if you're the Red Sox, getting the most out of him defensively in his athleticism, not this season, but could center field be an option? Maybe open up some more financial flexibility, if you will. Could center field be an option for him in the coming years? And then you plug in an actual true second baseman who can also help your lineup as well. Can he pull that off?
I feel like center field would probably be easier for him to play than second. Second's just, it's not just about fielding a ground ball and throwing it to second. It's making that turn from the shortstop. It's so different. I'm right. It's a mirror image of what you're doing coming across the turn too. He's got the arm to get away with it. Like Robinson Cano, just kind of was his footwork great, was his athleticism was great. And I feel like Story's athleticism will help, just like Trey Turner's, eventually it's going to help them get more comfortable, but that's a tough switch. Story could definitely be an outfielder. He could, do that, and what I don't know is Bogart's contract, is it going to be a Seager? It is. Yeah. They have him locked up.
Okay. He's locked up.
So he's a second baseman. It's not like Seager's going to leave, left, and then Turner kind of moved in there. So, we'll see what turns out. I guess, that was who played second. Did Devers play, or did he play third?
I think they had a couple mix of some guys. Now, keep in mind too, by the way, that Kike Hernandez is currently slated to start in center field on opening day. He can easily play second base, switch those two out, because I think Trevor Story, no disrespect to Kike Hernandez, is the better athlete, and I think that he would adapt fairly quick to playing center field and understanding that position.
Yeah, well, it's good to have Kike. He's so versatile, to move. Yeah, the Red Sox are in a good spot.
They are, and this baseball season is going to be, I think, a lot of fun. A lot of teams are projected to be really, really good, especially in both the East divisions. With the American League East, and you have four teams that can come out of that division making the postseason. The National League East, the National League West, even the Rockies have gotten a little bit better this week, picking up Randall Grichuk. It looks like they're trying to win.
Yeah.
So it'll be a
they're
really
switching stuff up, getting
season.
rid of Tapia. They're going for a more offensive slugging approach.
Yeah.
Which honestly, it sells tickets here in Colorado. You know, they used to call them the Blake Street Bombers when they had Bichette and Walker and Helton, and those guys were hitting like 40 jacks a year, and people loved it. You know, they really did. So, you know, maybe they're slowly making their way back to whatever that
relevancy.
That, yeah, which may, you know, it's going to sell seats. Right. It sells seats for sure. Whether or not it wins games, I'm not sure.
Who's been quiet? The Giants.
Yeah, they're
kind of scares you a little bit, doesn't it?
It just
makes you.
They have their plan, you know.
Their plan. Stick to it.
Yeah, he's 80, man. That guy's got to figure it out.
I'll give you the choice. Do you want to do our listener question first, or do you want to do our breakdown and then get to the listener question last?
Let's do the breakdown first.
All right. Trevor Story, Mechanical Breakdown Series, Volume 27. If you're not watching or haven't had the chance to yet, watch it on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting podcast page.
All right. So this clip of Story is really cool because, and I'm pretty sure it was the beginning of last year. It's a really low pitch. And in fact, it's, you know, I'm not going to say it's not hittable because he hit a home run with it, but it's, you know, shin, I would say. You know, it's dropping about 5 degrees and it's below his kneecap. Okay, it's below his kneecap. So how does he get to that pitch? You know, we do a lot of high pitches here, you know, for barrel control, because that's, you know, a pretty decent trend we got going on where pitchers are throwing up there. But, you know, how about this pitch that's down? So if we go back to Story, probably is my favorite move of his is his rhythm and how smooth he glides. So as he glides forward, so once he gets his foot up in the air, so actually let's mark where he starts. Okay, so this is, I'm just going to draw a box around his toes where he starts, and then he lifts it up and he only brings it back about maybe 3 inches, right? He only brings it back 3 inches, and he's only about 3 or 4 inches off the ground. That's what's cool. Like, he doesn't have a huge leg kick. And then he glides forward, and of course the camera's moving, so we really don't know how far this stride is. Okay, so my apologies there. I didn't look at that yet. So I'll start with, okay, his feet, I'll draw a line that's that far apart. And then when he strides, okay, that line is, you know, maybe 20% bigger, right? So he's probably took a total step of 8 inches or so. But that step, as he's gaining ground, look how he's just hovering his front foot over the ground. It's only 3, like I said, 3 or 4 inches off the ground. Now, what's cool about that is he can drop it at any time. So say he's looking for a breaking pitch and they throw him an inside fastball, because his foot's only a few inches off the ground, he can drop it right here. Boom. I'm going to drop my foot and be quick with my hands to get to that pitch. Or if it's a little slower, I can let my foot go and hold my weight on my back leg and my back hip a little bit longer. Or, you know, I can just drop and go whenever I feel like it. So it's a very adjustable stride versus somebody that gains the same amount of ground, probably has the same weight shift, right? The same amount of energy transfer, and then, but doesn't have the risk of pulling their knee up really high or their foot up really high. So that's one of his unique, I've always liked that, because when I work with players, when I'm trying to build rhythm, this is always where I start. I always start with this move where they're just gliding to see what their athleticism tells me. And then from there, we'll figure out, okay, do we want to go further? Do we want to not go as far? Do we want to have a little bit of a leg kick? You know, whatever kind of fits that player's mold, that's what we're going to work on. But I always start with this one. So that's number one. Number two, something that's interesting with him. Okay, and my players know, and I know all our online academy listeners, I make, or all my online academy players, I make listen to these breakdowns. Okay, and I send them to them. But you know, one of the things that's interesting to me is he actually flattens his bat as he strides. So most people start with it, like if you think of Bryce Harper starts with the bat like on his shoulder, right? And then as he strides, he lifts it up vertically. If you look at Story, he starts more up vertically when he loads, but then as his foot goes forward, he flattens his bat behind him. Okay. So most people in this position are like at a 45-degree angle with the bat, probably be like this. Okay, Acuna's like this, straight up, but you can see Story's still a little bit flatter. Okay, so I always teach our players in the beginning, those of you that are listening, right? We teach it on the shoulder so that it's flat and we can feel an easy turn. Then we'll start to kind of load the hands up a little bit more as our mechanics, smooth out. But this is probably one of the flattest positions at launch, is bat angle. Okay, so vertical would be this way and flat would be, maybe slightly under where he is. Okay, but you can see if there was a clock, he's more in that like 230 range. Okay, where his bat is, where most people are like in the 1 o'clock range. So interesting move there. Then as he goes to rotate, heel plants. Okay, you can see him cheating for a low pitch. So see how his back elbow is starting to come down a little bit more? They're still moving together. We talk about the elbows and the elbow separation. He doesn't have a lot of elbow separation. Not nearly as much as like a Vlad Guerrero that we reviewed. Who else have we recently reviewed? Simeon, like Simeon's got more of a separation there. Turner had, not Turner, sorry, who's the Dodgers outfielder?
We will be reviewing Turner very shortly. Chris Taylor.
Taylor, yeah, so much wider. But regardless of how separated your elbows are here, the key is if there was a brace between them, that separation, if they're 12 inches apart, 16 inches apart, or 8 inches apart, as long as they stay that way during the initial rotation, we're good. And that's what you see here. But you can see him kind of drop his hands to get to that pitch. You can see his back shin really trying to get down. He's kind of rolling in his back foot. You're going to see Chris Bryant in a Rockies uniform kind of do that same move with the legs. And then that gets his barrel, down a little bit more. You can see that barrel, his vertical bat angle is a lot steeper on this pitch because it's below his knees. So if I draw that same line to the catcher, I think it was kind of like that. Okay, maybe a little higher than that. You can see how he got to that low pitch, and notice how his power V is pretty low too. So if I stop him at extension, although he didn't get fully extended, but this is his power V position, notice how low it is, right? It's always going to be lower on low pitches. If it's not, then we topped it. Okay, if you have a high power V, meaning your right arm is extended here and your left arm is extended here and your bat is pointing up like this, but the pitch was, channeling down here like this one, then what happened is you swung up too much through contact and you would roll over that low pitch. So that's always something that I look for with pitches. Are they going to be a good low ball hitter? Maybe. It all depends on when they get behind the ball, do they extend this right arm on an angle like this to get through it? If they don't, and that right arm doesn't straighten until it gets on an angle like this, then that's a player that's going to roll over a ton of pitches. That's a guy I'm going to throw a lot of breaking balls to, 12 to 6 breaking balls to, because they're going to have a hard time getting through that pitch that's breaking down on them. So anyway, pretty cool move there. Again, on a low pitch, you can see his front leg really push back there at the end and straighten out. One of the things that's great, now if he was late on this pitch, here's, again, this is a really low pitch, but if he's late and hits the ball here, like behind his, well, it's probably equal to his front knee based on the camera angle here, because his vertical bat angle is so steep early in the zone, he's going to foul that pitch off. Okay, so he's a guy that is going to foul pitches up and to the right. Okay, if he drops that barrel, now the only way to get to this pitch is to drop your barrel a lot. Okay, so this is a great learning moment for all of my players, because if you set up a tee, here's what most kids do because somebody told them to. Okay, they say, hey, when you set up the tee, always set it up low. Okay, always set it up at the knees. So what happens is we have to get to this position that he's in. Okay, where you drop the barrel a little bit. Okay, your hand slot lower, and then you get to that pitch and you practice it. So if you take, whatever, 200 swings a week on a pitch that low, and you don't take 200 swings a week with a pitch up here, then your hand path now becomes what he's doing. I'm going to drop my hands a little bit more. I'm going to drop my barrel a little bit more. So when you have this kind of move and this kind of bat vertical angle, yes, it's great for you to get to a pitch like this. But if that's the only move you know, which I see a ton of, by the way, they'll have this same vertical bat angle, but they'll have their hands up here, like at the top of their chest or even higher. So they'll have their hands really high, but they'll still have the bat vertical angle of like -40 something. And then they're going to try to hit a pitch up here at the top of the thighs or the waist, and then they just foul it off all the time, or they top spin it to the left side. So the moral of this story is you have to be flexible with your learning. Okay. You have to do, it's always easier to drop your hands than it is to get your hands up. Okay. So what I do is when we're warming up, I'm always warming up, and honestly, just turn on the MLB Network snippets that they put in and watch the players warm up. Where does Bichette put the tee? Like it is chest. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at that that recent one that was floating around of him, I don't know if it was spring training this year or last year. Like his first few swings are a super high pitch. Donaldson's the same way. So guys that you think are really, big time home run hitters that, are barrel droppers and just try to hit the ball in the air, watch how they actually warm up, because it's totally different than maybe what they're doing in games when they're natural swings. So you have to fight that. Story is a natural low ball hitter. Okay. This is a natural move for him. So he's going to get beat up here. So where does he practice? He practices up here. I'm like 99% sure there's a breakdown of him when he visited the MLB studios. You can look that up on YouTube or the MLB Network, where he's talking about his top hand. And he's talking about keeping it vertical so that he can get to higher pitches. Like it's all his top hand. Well, what does he do here? His top hand's really underneath to hit this low pitch. Well, that's probably natural for him. So he has to fight that on higher pitches. So know you as a hitter. That's probably the best thing that I can provide for players with experience is, I can tell a player, this is what you're comfortable with, right? Like, where do you like the ball? Like I can look at your swing and be like, you're a low ball hitter or you're a high ball hitter. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to create a plan where we maybe practice 65% the other way. Okay, so if you're a good high ball hitter, let's do 65% of our reps down. Okay, vice versa, if you're a good low ball hitter, let's do 65% of our reps up. You're still mixing and matching. You're still doing both during a session. It's just we're going to weight one side of that equation a little bit. So anyway, that's a really cool swing of Story. It kind of covers all the aspects of a good stride. One of the things he does that I didn't touch upon, his front shoulder does stay up a little bit more than most. So at heel plant position, notice how his front shoulder isn't really down. It's not down nearly as much as players that we've looked at before. Okay. So that is an area of concern in terms of adjustability. Maybe that's why his strikeout rate is a little bit higher, because once he plants and this front shoulder starts to come up a little bit, he's got to go. It's hard for him to make adjustments to slower pitches from that position. So how do we compensate for that? Maybe we're a little bit smarter, right? We have to anticipate a little bit better and not miss our pitches. But that would be, if there's one thing that I see with his swing that would lead to more strikeouts, it would be that, that vertical bat angle, which honestly, it's a really low pitch, so you have to do it. We could look at a higher pitch and it's much less than that, but it would be that front shoulder not being down as much at that heel plant position right here. So anyway, there's the breakdown for Story. He does some things, you can pick. Like if you're a 16-year-old player watching this, or an 18-year-old player, or a 10-year-old player, or a boy or a girl, what are the great assets? His rhythm and stride are fantastic. Like that is the thing that I would try to copy, his rhythm and his stride. And then
if I may, with the stride, I wanted to bring this up because watching him and his swing, there's a sticking point in my head about his stride. I don't think it started like that. Maybe it did. I could be completely wrong. Two-part question. How does his stride evolve to what it is now, which is basically a leg drag? And is that something that you would teach for a hitter as it pertains to their timing and just overall mechanics working from the ground up?
So for those of you watching the analysis, Jim asked, was this stride something he's always done, or is it something that evolved over the years? Which is a fantastic question. Let's think about who he was surrounded by when he got to the big leagues. Obviously, Tulo was gone, but Tulo had kind of a similar glide.
Right.
Is this maybe somebody in the minor league system had mentioned that? But Carlos Gonzalez was probably his main mentor, Charlie Blackmon as well. So this is very, very similar to Carlos Gonzalez. Carlos Gonzalez had more of he would swing the leg, but you can even see Story here. He starts open and then he brings his foot in and then he glides and then he swings it open and lets it rip. So it's a very right-handed Carlos Gonzalez, who was just such a great hitter all around, his entire career. So I'm sure it had something to do with that. I'm sure it had to do with, people that he was around and guys figured out. I remember when Bonds was a superstar, all of a sudden all the Giants guys looked like Barry Bonds. They had the same stance, they had the same arm guard, they had the same hitch. They all tried to do the same thing he did.
Right.
Didn't mean it worked out for everybody.
Yeah, not everybody's that athletic.
No.
Superhuman.
But you can take bits and pieces, and
you could.
and I guarantee you that's probably part of story is you pull things from different. You talk to different guys. Why do you do this? Oh, let's try. I like the way that looks. Watch players. I like that. Let me try that. Oh, that feels good. Boom. Now it's in for the rest of your life.
What about toe tap with him? Would that be something that he could go to if he's struggling going forward?
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I always felt like a toe tap. I don't know. I'm not a big toe tap guy. The guys that do it, I feel.
You know what? Save that for next week's episode. Overrated, underrated.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
Executive producing on the fly. We got an email here, and this comes to us from Zach from Sacramento, California. Sent to us via Jimbo Podcast. Great job, by the way, on the breakdown app. Jimbo Podcast 21@gmail.com. Zach writes, Jim and Jake, I love the podcast. My question has to do with timing. How do you fix a hitter's timing? Is there a quick fix? Is it a gradual change? I feel the drills are great, and coaches really try to jam that down your throat. But if you don't have timing, you'll never succeed at hitting, correct? Thanks. Keep up the great work. And that's from Zach. I think that's the first time Zach's writing in from Sacramento, California, sent to us via Jimbo Podcast 21@gmail.com.
That's a great question, Zach. From the Sac town and back down.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just had to throw some 90s rap in there for our audience. Without timing, yes, you're never going to be a great hitter. So how does one develop good timing? And why do we see the ball better at better times? And yes, coaches do. They pound it out. All right, let's crank up the machine and do a short box, or be 40 feet away, now move back to 50 feet and try to adjust that timing. To me, that adjusts our looks, not necessarily our timing. Okay, so timing has to do. It's almost like a ballet. Or an orchestra, the timing of all the instruments working together. It all starts when the pitcher moves. So we have to, that's the most important way to get timing, is to make sure, if you have a player struggling with timing, get them timing at bats, meaning, or timing looks. Put them when your guys are throwing bullpens. Every time a pitcher's throwing a bullpen, put a hitter in there. Every single time, especially if you have a struggling hitter. And have the hitter just sit. They don't even have to be right on the plate. They can be a few feet off the plate, but they're watching the pitcher wind up. They're watching the spin of the ball. They're watching the release point. As a coach, I would stand with them. I would stand right behind them and I would talk them through. Okay, you need to get into your back heel. As soon as that pitcher starts to break his hands, I want you to get into your back heel. Right. And then the player would try to do that, and then they would drop their foot too late. And I'd be like, okay, that was too late for your rhythm. You got to move a little bit earlier than that, or you have to move a little faster than that, or you have to move a little bit slower than that. So there's ways to teach timing without just creating chaos of, fast pitches, slow pitches, fast, which everyone wants to do. Take a stride, don't take a stride. You can't throw too much at a player at once. Now, you can always take the stride out and just, drop your heel and go if a player has terrible timing, but work through it that way. I would put a cone down about 12 feet in front of home plate, 10 to 12 feet in front of home plate. And I would video the players from the side just taking pitches, doing their stand-in. And then I would stop them. I would video, and then the pitcher's is still in his own world, right? He's doing his work. I would take the hitter around. We'd look at the video. When does your front foot get down? Geez, my front foot's not planting until the ball's like 4 feet from the plate. Right. So see that cone? That's when your foot's got to get down. And then all of a sudden they'll start to figure out that early and slow rhythm. So that's the way that I would start the process, is with looks, with bullpens. Sometimes even just cranking a machine up and not swinging at it. You know, hey, we're going to face 90 today, or we're going to face 60 today. Let's do the cone drill, put the cone out there. And I think I have that in the online academy for my players. You can type in the, in the search column, just type in timing. And there's one in there where the cone's set up, and I go through how to stride off a machine and make sure you're getting your foot down in time, because you can kill a player's timing by having them head off of the machine and not telling them when to move. And vice versa, you can make a player have great control and great timing if they can stride off a machine. Watch the big leaguers again. Search, whatever, YouTube or Twitter, and watch big leaguers hitting off machines and watch their footwork. Watch how soon they start to move. You'll be amazed. It's not necessarily what they're doing in games. A lot of times they're picking their foot up and just kind of holding it there for a second or two. Then when the ball shoots out of the machine, they got to drop it. But the worst thing you can do is not pick up your foot until that ball shoots out of the machine. That's what kills timing. So just make sure you're spot checking, the right way players are hitting off machines, and just make sure they're moving soon enough. If they're moving soon enough, doesn't mean they got to plant their foot early and just wait there. But if th're moving soon enough, they're going to have a chance.
All right, Zach, thank you very much for writing in. And if anybody has any questions, concerns, comments, please write us jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. In there, I did write down a couple of things in my phone for next week's episode of things we can touch on, elements of hitting, and what will be overrated, underrated, I think part 3 next week. Going back to that, we'll do that next week. And then Juan Soto coming up in a few weeks as well, breaking down his swing. I think we're breaking down Trey Turner as we, once again, I hate to use this term and I continually use it, but I have to say it as we inch closer to episode number 100.
Woo-hoo.
Pretty cool milestone.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. My favorite week is soon. My favorite week. Some people have different favorite weeks. My favorite week is the Masters and then opening baseball weekend. Opening baseball weekend,
I think is, usually
the 7th. Is that?
Well, usually it would have been this weekend, I think.
Yeah, usually they have like an early start, and then baseball starts, and then the Masters. Beautiful thing.
US, what about the no tennis? Or you're not a tennis guy? Oh, wait, save that, because guess what? We'll talk about that on overrated, underrated.
Let's talk about tennis. I started watching.
Or we'll just talk about it this week too. We can do that too. Go ahead.
No, I started watching King Richard with my kids last night. Watched the first half of it. So good, so great. I'm excited to finish it. So we'll talk about the recap next week.
All right. What do you got coming up at the lab?
What do we got coming up? Just prepping for season, right? Guys are in season, so we're getting them game ready. That's the big thing. And prepping we're doing summer camps. As soon as school gets out, but we're doing a little bit different this year. We're doing more specialized and small group summer camps. So, everybody does, hey, there's 100 kids out there and some kids are quiet and they don't get the attention they deserve. We're going to do really small camps of like 4 to 6 kids at a time throughout the day. Going to different stations, working with throwing and hitting and fielding and then some mental stuff. So it'll be pretty cool. So we're designing all those for this summer.
All right. So log on to thelabbcs.com and of course, epsteinhitting.com for the online academy, correct?
Yes, sir.
Any phone numbers you want to pass along?
Yep.
epsteinhitting.com. Would have been good right there is for the people on YouTube side if you would have just given me the finger. That would have just ended the show. Boom. Right there. All right. Thank you for listening, watching, everybody. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, and we will talk to you next week.